Loyalty through admiration. Maybe that's enough in a peaceful world. But I come from a world at war.
Hi everyone, this video will discuss the character Reina in MapleStory, including who she is and her appearances in the story so far. Reina is the 5th apostle of Jaren Darmur that is confirmed in the story, of which there are 12 apostles in total. In addition to being an apostle of Darmur, she also holds the title of Divine, or Lord, of one of the 6 High Flora territories in Grandis. The Divines or Lords are essentially the rulers of the respective territories. For reference, Eremos, which is Khali's starting area, is one of the 6 territories. Reina is the lord of a snowy mountain territory in Grandis, which is currently unexplorable in-game. Furthermore, Reina has mastery over ice magic, and one of her eyes even turns a deep blue color when she channels this magic directly. Lastly, Reina's weapon of choice is a frozen cane. Given the direction of the story at the moment and Reina's status as an apostle of Darmur, it is very likely that Reina will become a boss in a future area. With that aside, here is a deeper dive on who Reina is and what we know about her so far. This video will contain spoilers from Khali's storyline, specifically her optional side quests. There will also be spoilers to the main Arteria storyline and its optional side quests, very brief spoilers to the Carcion storyline, and lastly there will be some major spoilers to the Dawn Banquet event, which is currently unavailable in GMS as of this video. Reina's existence was first briefly implied in Khali's storyline. After Khali completes her main story quest, she can go back to her starting area of Eremos and complete some optional side quests. It is through these optional side quests that an individual associated with Reina is first mentioned. After Khali completes NPC Bara's quest, Bara tells Khali more about himself and where he is from. More specifically, he says that he is from Grandis' snowy mountain territory, and that he decided to leave his home due to him not being super fond of his territory's ruler. He says that the snowy mountain territory doesn't have the best land to grow food, and so the ruler's primary goal is to address the immediate starvation of his people. While Bara acknowledges that the ruler is a good person because of this, Bara himself thinks that the best way for their territory's people to escape poverty is to join Darmur's central army and relocate to a better land. But the ruler has no interest in this course of action. It is later revealed in the Arteria storyline that the ruler that Bara was referring to was the ruler before Reina. In other words, at some unknown time after Bara's quest, Reina ended up becoming the new ruler of the snowy mountain region. Another one of these optional side quests reveals that Grandis has 6 separate high flora territories, each of which are led by an individual called a Divine or Lord. Eremos, Khali's starting area, is one of these 6 territories, and the Divine of Eremos is Ipsilon, who is another one of Darmur's apostles. Since Reina is the Divine of the snowy territory in Grandis, it's possible that this territory may be added as an explorable region in-game sometime in the future. Reina's first ever appearance was in the Battleship Arteria storyline. The animation video that plays before the Arteria storyline shows a meeting taking place between Darmur and his apostles, including Havoc, Ipsilon, and Limbo. Darmur points towards the apostle that will lead the first invasion of the High Flora in Maple World, and it is none other than Reina, who reveals herself from the shadows, freezing the ground beneath her with every step she takes. After our player defeats Apostle Kaling in Shangri-La and returns to Victoria Island, it is discovered that Maple World is being invaded by the High Flora. The player heads to Arev to discuss the situation with Nineheart and Empress Cygnus when suddenly a gigantic battleship led by Reina appears over Arev and fires a laser that destroys Arev's defense barrier. Reina, alongside her second-in-command Rista, as well as the High Flora army, drop down and start attacking the Cygnus Knights. There were a lot of casualties on both sides. Even Oz, the chief knight of fire, was very close to being killed, but fortunately Irina arrived just in time to save her. Eventually, Reina ends up reaching the main base in Arev and kidnaps Empress Cygnus.
It's a tragedy, you know. So many lives, snuffed out like sparks in a blizzard, all for you.
A High Flora. You must be the enemy leader. What do you want?
That's quite a fire in your eyes. You're a brave one. Most people don't dare stand up to me. Although, I do think you'll come to regret that choice in the end.
Reina, with her main mission of capturing Empress Cygnus accomplished, attempts to withdraw the Arteria battleship from Arev and escape, but Shinsu, who returns to Arev after hearing about the invasion, uses her magic to freeze the Arteria battleship in place, giving the Alliance some time to invade the battleship and save Cygnus. Reina gets a little annoyed by her battleship being frozen in place. She was originally tasked with bringing Cygnus to the capital of Grandis, where Darmoor resides, so that Cygnus's powers could be extracted. But with the Arteria frozen in place by Shinsu, Reina decides to extract Cygnus's powers herself by using a special crystal given to her by Darmoor. Normally, using the crystal would cause the user to experience significant recoil damage. However, Reina redirected the recoil damage to her frozen soldiers, or prisoners, as she likes to call them. Our player ends up invading the Arteria battleship alongside the Alliance and fights through waves of High Flora soldiers and mercenaries on board before eventually reaching the top deck, where they notice that the temperature in the ship is a lot cooler. They then fight through waves of High Flora soldiers that are made out of literal ice before reaching Reina's command room. There, the player sees Cygnus severely weakened after Reina used Darmoor's special crystal to drain her power. The player fights Reina, and although she is surprised by the player's power level, she ultimately defeats the player. Reina then launches an attack to kill the player, but Cygnus, using the last of her strength, rushes to take the attack in the player's place. And in her final breath, Cygnus apologizes for the burden she has placed on the player.
I'm slipping away, as if I'm drowning in deep water. I can't hear anything. All I can see are the adversary's tears. So, this is how it feels to die.
The player, enraged at Reina for killing Cygnus, fights her again, this time with significantly more strength. The Alliance ends up reaching the top deck of the Arteria when they notice Cygnus's lifeless body on the ground. They then corner Reina, vowing to never forgive her. Meanwhile, Reina, running out of options, decides to launch an attack through Darmoor's crystal. However, she takes significant recoil damage from the attack as the frozen soldiers she redirected the recoil to had been destroyed by the Alliance. Luckily for Reina, she ends up being saved by her second-in-command Rista just in time and ends up fleeing the battleship, leaving the Alliance and most of the enemy mercenaries on the ship. However, before she leaves, she tells the player that they will meet again in the future. The Alliance, devastated at Cygnus's death, begin mourning her passing. However, our player notices that Cygnus moved one of her fingers, and Claudine, who is also a doctor, begins immediately performing emergency treatment on Cygnus. The Alliance then finds out that earlier on, Reina ordered Rista to deploy special bombs called vision bombs within the Arteria, which would fill the ship with a deadly gas. Luckily, the Alliance ends up escaping the Arteria battleship before the vision bombs could activate. Unluckily for the enemy side, Reina only ordered the evacuation of the High Flora soldiers, leaving many of the enemy mercenaries on the ship to meet their fate. Back at Arev, Shinsu ends up taking Cygnus, who is in a coma, to Leaf Free so that they can both rest together and so that she can accompany Cygnus in her dreams. The storyline then ends with Reina and Rista discussing the player's power level and that, despite the faults of their mission, they accomplished what they needed to for Darmoor as well as for the prosperity of their territory. After completing the main Arteria storyline quests, some optional side quests become available for the player to complete, which reveal some interesting details about Reina's character. The first side quest involves going to the cryogenic barracks at the top deck of the Arteria in order to gain enemy information. There, the player finds a series of diary entries from one of the frozen soldiers who Reina referred to as her prisoners. The soldier's diary entries reveal that he was a soldier of the previous lord of the Snowy Mountain region. Even though food was scarce, everyone still looked out for one another and he enjoyed his peaceful life. However, Reina challenged the lord to a duel. At the time, Reina was a priest, and priests are directly under the lords in terms of caste rank. She ended up killing the lord in a duel and became the new lord of the Snowy region. Moreover, another one of this soldier's diary entries reveals that this soldier and many other soldiers refused to serve Reina and honor her as the new lord. As a consequence, Reina froze all of these soldiers and wiped their memories, calling these soldiers her prisoners. In other words, the frozen soldier monsters at the top deck maps of the Arteria are essentially the previous lord's soldiers that Reina froze and wiped the memories of. This is also why this specific soldier wrote these diary entries in the first place, because he knew his memory was fading and he wanted a written record of his life before he met his fate. Furthermore, these frozen soldiers were also the soldiers that Reina would redirect the recoil damage of Darmur's draining crystal to whenever she channeled the crystal's power. The second side quest involves Mihail returning from his mission. If the player is a Mihail, then this quest is actually not available to the player. For all non-Mihail players though, this side quest involves Mihail returning from his mission of tracking the whereabouts of Will, only to discover that Arev was invaded by Reina and that Cygnus is in a coma. Mihail goes to visit Cygnus in Leafree, where he apologizes and blames himself for Cygnus's state. He says that it is his responsibility as the Chief Knight of Light to protect Cygnus and he failed. Our player reassures him, and Mihail promises that Reina will pay for what she has done. Given Mihail's connection to Cygnus, if Reina does become a boss in the future, I think it is pretty likely that there will be an exclusive achievement to defeat Reina as Mihail. The third side quest involves our player investigating the Arteria battleship and coming across a High Flora mercenary who killed one of the Cygnus soldiers. Our player asks the mercenary why they killed this soldier even after their leader, Reina, abandoned them. The mercenary decides to share his perspective as he considers himself a dead man anyways. The mercenary explains that many of Darmur's soldiers are not even of the High Flora race. Instead, many of the soldiers are individuals from non-High Flora races that were forced to fight for Darmur or else their loved one's safety would be compromised. In other words, many of the mercenaries have no choice but to keep fighting if they want their family's safety guaranteed. What this tells us about Reina is the exact same thing, in that many of the mercenaries in Reina's army are non-High Floras that are forced to fight. Towards the end of the Arteria storyline, when Reina asks Rista to activate the vision bombs, she even says to only evacuate the High Flora soldiers and forget about the mercenaries. Reina was briefly mentioned in the Carcion storyline by Limbo, who was on his way to Carcion in order to invade the area with his Spectre army. Limbo finds out that Reina succeeded in extracting Cygnus's powers, but failed to extract Shinsu's powers, leaving him unimpressed with her. He even refers to Reina as that woman, instead of referring to her by name. Reina's most recent appearance in the story is in the Dawn Banquet event, which is an event that is currently unavailable in GMS as of this video. This event story takes place after the level 290 Talahart storyline, and the story involves a banquet being held for Jaren Darmur's apostles. 6 out of 12 of the apostles, including Reina, attend the banquet. The animation video for the event reveals that Limbo is not super fond of Reina, chastising her for being late to the banquet and saying that her ego has skyrocketed just because she accomplished her mission in the Arteria storyline. Reina responds to Limbo by saying that at least her mission was successful, unlike Limbo, who failed his mission at Carcion. Our player infiltrates the banquet in disguise in order to gain more information, and we find out when speaking to Reina that she still has not yet recovered from the side effects of the recoil damage caused by channeling Darmur's crystal at the end of the Arteria storyline. Reina ends up deciding to leave the banquet early on, leaving her second-in-command Rista at the banquet in her place. Interestingly, Epsilon, another one of Darmor's apostles who attended the banquet, notices Reina's weakened state and inquires to himself. There are some theories as to why Epsilon has shown an interest in Reina. The first theory is that Epsilon wants to learn more about Darmor's red draining crystal, and he can visibly see that Reina is taking a long time to recover from the side effects of using the crystal. The second theory is that Epsilon, seeing Reina weakened, may be plotting against her. It is very likely that Reina will be seen again in the future. As she is the lord of the Snowy Mountain region in Grandis, which is currently inaccessible, it's possible that we may encounter her in this region and even potentially challenge her as a boss. So yes, this is Reina and what we know about her in the story so far. Thank you so much for watching the video, I really appreciate it. Bye bye!